I'm Heather.
And I'm Ferg.
We are new old friends, and this is episode 6, the finale of Crimes of a Country Garden.
Part of Comedy Whodunits for your ears. Now, Penny is closing in on the culprit and has just to sort out the final red herrings from the... What colour are herrings that aren't guilty? Or that are guilty?
I don't know.
Well, neither do I. Anyway, that's what she has to do. Now, we really hope you enjoy this final episode and have enjoyed the series. Please do leave us a review and tell your friends.
Enjoy the finale.
Off we go!
The entire household decamped from the drawing room, heading for the servants' quarters and Thomas's room. Decorum had broken down a bit and there was pushing and shoving.
Excuse me,
My Thomas wouldn't steal or kill. He reads about pressing flowers.
Nobody's accusing anybody. We're going to see what we can see.
Out of my way. I only feel safe by the inspector.
Oh?
Be careful, she is a delicate flower. Like my roses.
Charles, I'm picking up the strangest energy flowing from you.
I'm fine, Mom.
Perry pulled me aside and asked if I wouldn't mind giving him...
A little recap on what's happening? I think I got distracted.
It was typical Perry. Brain the size of a planet, but not great at focusing. It's also quite handy for narrative purposes. OK, so the case of the murdered roses is finished. Maisie the maid was trying to get the gardener sacked because he stole the job from her brother.
So we've cracked it then?
But we're not going to tell the Earl.
Why not?
We trust Maisie and feel sorry for her because she's in love with Christophe de Bruly and they can't be together.
Because of the outdated class system?
Because of the outdated class system.
Uh-huh.
So Christophe will marry Lady Harriet and keep Maisie's horticultural homicide a secret. Meanwhile, the gardener was poisoned in the potting shed and half the household have motive.
Yes, Maisie and her French lover because of her brother.
Lady Harriet was being harassed by Lance. Mrs. Webster knew he was stealing from the Earl, putting her husband's job in jeopardy. And she also knew about...
Thomas's gambling debts!
Exactly. The same Thomas to whose room everyone is now heading because the Countess's diamond has been stolen.
So if the diamond turns up in Thomas's room, he's our killer.
It won't look good, but you'll not be there to see it.
I won't?
You won't. I finally got a hunch.
Oh, you've got lovely posture, Penny girl.
Thank you, but I mean a detective's hunch.
Bent over a magnifying glass.
Perry, you know what I mean. A feeling.
Oh, like the Countess's psychic gifts.
A bit. You need to check something for me while everyone else is distracted with Thomas. I told Perry what to do. There were a few things in the shadows of my brain, and if my bright idea was right, I'd get a better look at them. He jogged off and I hurried to catch up with the group. Inspector Chase threw open the door, and Thomas was on the edge of his bed, staring blankly at a stuffed envelope. He was understandably shocked to see the group of us huddled around the opening.
Inspector Chase, Lady Harriet, your lordship, what's everyone doing here?
The inspector answered,
It's not what we're doing so much as what you've been doing, laddie. I don't understand. Charles, what's going on?
Charles's face flushed pink, and he looked at his feet.
The Countess's diamond's missing, Thomas. Stolen. And where were you last night? I were in bed all night. Why?
This response provoked an almighty reaction from Thomas's father, Mr. Webster. His face, which I'd rarely seen in anything other than a forbidding frown, looked as though it might tear down the middle.
Oh, son, what have you done?
What's you talking about, Terence? Our boy hasn't done anything. Have you, Thomas?
No, ma'am. You're lying, Thomas. You weren't in bed last night. I heard your door and I thought your stomach might be playing up again and I could fetch you a mug of warm milk. But when I popped my head round your door, you were nowhere to be seen.
Minutes before, I would have thought it more likely he would have heard Thomas's door and gone to tell him to be quiet rather than check up on his health. But he looked so pained by catching his son in a lie that perhaps he was a more sensitive soul than I'd given him credit for.
Well, Mrs. Pink and I both heard someone outside last night. Didn't we, Mrs. Pink?
What were you and Mrs. Pink doing together in the middle of the night?
We heard a noise and went to investigate it, Lady Harriet. We're both detectives.
He looked at me with disdain.
Of sorts.
Then Chase turned back to Thomas, who barely moved and still clutched in his hands a bulging, unaddressed envelope.
Well, what have you to see for yourself?
Thomas first looked imploringly at his father, who just shook his head sadly, then to his mother, who could only offer a tearful smile. Finally, he looked at Charles. The Countess placed a hand on her servant's arm and whispered, "I've got a very bad feeling about this, Charles." Charles looked at his employer and sadly nodded his agreement. Thomas drew in a breath and raised his chin.
I can't explain it, I'm afraid. I can't explain any of it, but I swear I did not kill Lance Brown or steal the Countess's diamond.
A cruel smile spread across Inspector Chase's face.
Nobody mentioned Lance Brown, lad. That is what is known as incriminating yourself. What have you got in your hands there? This? Oh, it's money.
Thomas hung his head and offered the envelope to the policeman. Inside, it was stuffed with banknotes.
I've no idea how it got into my room, but I don't expect you to believe me. I wouldn't believe me.
I believe you, Thomas.
Thanks, ma'am.
Me too, Thomas.
Moi aussi.
Well, I don't. Thieving swine should be locked up until the police arrive.
Inspector Chase is already here.
I meant until more police arrive.
Why don't we put young Mr. Webster in the wine cellar, eh? Give him a bit of time to think about how much better he'll fare if he gives a full confession. I'm sorry, sir, but Thomas isn't going to run away. Are you, Thomas? I wouldn't feel right locking up my own boy. Your lordship, can't we just leave him be where he is until they take him away? That seems reasonable to me.
I quite agree.
Well, it's neither of your decisions. It's Inspector Chase's, and we won't be bossed about by the staff either. Come along. Webster, you don't need to lock up your son yourself. I've got my own key. This way.
The inspector manhandled Thomas to follow behind Lady Harriet. Seeing how helpless and lost Thomas was had sobered the group. The Earl and the Countess drifted back upstairs, accompanied by Mr. Webster and Charles. Maisie and Christophe took the opportunity to step out into the garden, perhaps for a final farewell before Christophe's postponed proposal. Only me and Mrs. Webster were left in Thomas's room. She smoothed down his bedsheets and aligned the edge of a book on flower pressing with the edge of his small bedside table before drawing in a huge breath and turning to me.
Mrs. Pink, I think there's something I need to tell you.
What is it?
Not here. Can we talk in the kitchen? I'll put the kettle on.
I followed her along the corridor, and just before we got to the kitchen, Perry bounded up to me and tapped me on the shoulder.
I think I found your hunch, Penny girl.
He whispered to me and handed me what I'd sent him to search for.
What do you want me to do now?
Is that your husband? He can come along too. There's enough tea for 3.
I was desperate to grab a moment to myself and inspect what Perry had just given me, and was thinking of ways I could get out of talking to Mrs. Webster. Thankfully, I couldn't come up with anything, or I might have missed out on a big revelation.
Thank you for speaking with me, dears. I'm sure you both want to be where the action is. I should probably be talking to the inspector, or be with my poor Thomas. But you are the one I wanted to tell, Mrs. Pink. I think you'll understand. You've got kind eyes. Doesn't your wife have lovely, kind eyes, Mr. Pink?
My wife? Oh, yes. She does have lovely ones. Eyes, I mean.
Thank you. What will I understand, Mrs. Webster?
I think you already know about my Thomas's losing at cards.
I do. Thomas told me after I found Mr. Webster's pocket watch in Lance's bedroom.
Mr. Webster's watch? But I saw it today back in the drawer where he keeps it.
I gave it back to Thomas because I believed him.
Oh, Penny girl, you shouldn't have kept that from the police.
Ah, I see. I knew you were a good person. It's in the eyes. You can't fake kind eyes. You can fake angry eyes. Just look at my Terence. He's a softy, really. He just likes to pretend he's mean. But kind eyes, you can't fake. Thomas has always had kind eyes.
She blew on her cup of tea and drifted off, perhaps remembering Thomas's long-lashed eyes as he'd grown from a baby to the man he was today. A man who stood accused of grand larceny and murder. I felt for her, but I did want to get back to the action, not to mention have a look at the clue Perry might have uncovered. What did you want to tell me, Mrs. Webster?
Oh, yes. I don't know anything about the diamond, but what I can say for certain is that my Thomas didn't kill Lance Brown.
How can you be sure?
Because I did.
She took a little sip of her tea. If it wasn't Thomas, I thought I had a pretty good idea of what happened, but this was not it. Perry spoke for us both when he said,
What?
I killed Lance Brown. I'm not proud of it. Obviously, it wasn't a nice thing to do, but he wasn't a nice man. So I don't feel too bad, all things considered. Oh, it's good to get that off my chest. I've been having awful heartburn since.
I don't want to be rude, but it's a bit convenient you confessing to this now that your only son is under lock and key as the main suspect, isn't it, Mrs. Webster?
I can understand why you say that, dear, which is why I wanted to tell you before I told the policeman. I want you to help me prove it was me and not Thomas.
How?
You two are detectives, I'm sure you'll think of a way.
No, how did you kill Lance Brown?
I poisoned him.
I didn't mean to, but I couldn't help looking down at the cup of tea Mrs. Webster had just made Perry and I.
Oh, don't be silly, dear. If I wanted you dead, I'd have slipped you something in your food without telling you.
Well, that's good to know. Is that how you poisoned the gardener?
No, I put it in his coffee. He has a flask which he takes with him while he works, so the other morning I let myself into his room and tipped in the poison.
Where did you get the poison from?
OK, but this part goes no further than you two. I'm only confessing my own crimes here, nobody else's.
She got it from Maisie's room. She knew she was poisoning the roses.
Why, yes, dear. Oh, you are clever. Well, there you go, that's my story. Will you help me convince the police and save my poor Thomas?
Can you keep this to yourself for a couple more hours? I need to check a few things, but there might be a way to prove that both you and Thomas are innocent.
But I'm not innocent, dear. That's what I've just told you. We'll see.
Perry, take Mrs. Webster upstairs to join the Earl and the Countess for a drink. You've earned it. No wine for anyone, though.
Righto. Come along, Mrs. W. When Penny Girl gets a look in her eyes like that, it's best to find something else to get interested in. For example, do you happen to know the etymology of the word clue? It's fascinating, so it all starts...
I'll be honest and say I wasn't yet sure I could do what I told Mrs. Webster I could, but looking at what Perry had found made me more confident. I went along the corridor to Maisie's room and had a little nosy around. The box of poison was still poorly hidden at the end of her bed, but nothing else of note. Next I visited Thomas's room. I found some paper with different sketches of a sign for a bed and breakfast hotel and a dahlia in between the pages of his flower pressing book, but nothing that would help his case one way or the other. Then I returned to Lance's bedroom. No one had been there since I visited 2 days earlier, and everything was exactly as I remembered it. That was interesting. I went to join the others in the drawing room, making one short stop on the way. The room I entered contained all the same faces as earlier, and still no Thomas, but for a very different reason. Perry was sat with Mrs. Webster at a small table.
Come and sit by me, Penny Girl. Would you care for a sherry? His lordship has told me to relax certain protocols until after this mess.
The poor butler was hanging on to his composure by a thread. Without his permanent frown, I could see he did have kind eyes. It made what I had to do next more difficult. I whispered to Perry.
Perry, I need you to ask the inspector what will happen to Thomas now.
Well, it's obvious, Penny Girl. He'll be tried, found guilty, and then hanged. Well, unless his mother confesses, in which case they'll hang her. He'll still end up doing time for the theft, though.
I know that, but I need you to ask Inspector Chase.
Well, isn't that going to upset everyone, Penny?
Please, it's the only way to play out one of my hunches.
One of your hunches?
I have two now.
Like a camel.
Just ask him, Perry.
Mrs. Webster? She looked up at me from her sherry with her red-rimmed eyes. This was going to be hard on her, but I needed her to stay strong. Remember what we spoke about? A couple of hours, maximum.
I can endure that, dear. I was in labour with Thomas for 19 hours. He didn't want to come out.
I gave Perry a nudge and nodded towards the inspector, who was sat quietly chatting with Lady Harriet.
Inspector Chase? Mr. Pink? Could you describe the next steps in the process of justice? I'm sure I'd find it fascinating. Oh, right. Right you are. Well, he'll be taken away, like. Then he'll get his trial. Every man gets a trial. Probably charged with murder and the theft of the Bruly Diamond both, and he'll be found guilty.
I was busy watching the reactions of a couple of people in the room, and I was sure my plan was working. I nudged Perry again.
And once Thomas is found guilty, then what? Well, he'll be sentenced, won't he? I see. Ow! What will his sentence be? Oh, murder. If his lawyer was good, maybe he'd get it down to manslaughter, but with the theft as well...
Death, Inspector? Are you saying Thomas will be sentenced to death?
Aye, probably.
But if it weren't for the theft of the diamond, he might be let off?
Well, not let off, but he might get away with life in jail without the theft. But the diamond's gone and he's got all this cash he can't account for, so...
I know, but if he could account for it, and if there was another explanation for Lance's death, they wouldn't hang him.
I guess not. But he's no offering any explanations himself now, is he? It never looks great when a suspect makes something up later on. In the shadow over the gallows, if you like.
I'd pressed as hard as I could, and looking at Mr. and Mrs. Webster, I worried I'd inflicted this pain unnecessarily. But finally, bravely, Charles stood up.
Thomas didn't steal the diamond. Oh, aye? And who did? You? No, sir. Thomas did not steal the diamond last night. He was with me.
Mr. Webster leant heavily against a wall. Mrs. Webster simply closed her eyes and lowered her head. Had she known?
He was with you? Yeah. In my room, all night. So he couldn't have stolen the diamond.
He turned to the Countess.
I'm sorry, Mum. I know it's against the law, but we're in love. I don't believe he killed Lance Brown, and I know he did not steal your diamond.
Don't apologise to me, Charles. I've always known, and I don't care.
Excuse me a moment. But how do you explain the bundle of cash that just happened to turn up in his room, if not for selling the diamond? Magic?
Magic? He's mocking us. They're in it together, the pair of them. Disgusting monsters.
Lady Harriet, don't you dare call my son or his friend a disgusting monster.
Don't I dare? Don't you dare? You forget your place. I'm a Longmeadow and you're a Webster.
Oh, do shut up, Harriet. You horrid, horrid child. I apologise on behalf of my daughter, Mr. Webster, Mrs. Webster. Charles, please go on. I don't know what else to call it except magic, your lordship. For weeks now, the Countess has been picking horses to practice her gift, and she kept getting them right.
But I never put any money on them.
No, Mum, but after a few winners, I thought, why not? And placed a stake. It won, so I put the winnings on the next, and the next, and the next, and soon I had the money you saw. So what was it doing in my son's room? It's always been our dream to run a hotel together. A B&B, really. There's so much we can't do, but we can be partners in business and no one would think too much of that. The money was a gift to Thomas. We could use it to buy a little place on the seafront somewhere and start a life together.
There was a stunned silence in the room. The first of my hunches had proved correct, and it wouldn't be too long before I could test the second. Before we got to that, though, Christoph had risen to his feet and was applauding Charles's revelation.
This is so beautiful. It makes me want to empty my own heart also.
Oh, put a sock in it, Christoph. Yes, I suppose I'll marry you, but I want a long engagement and a big ring.
Lady Harriet's interruption stopped Christoph in his tracks and also made Inspector Chase double take, but not as much as what happened next. The door swung open and 2 uniformed police officers stepped in, taking up places on either side of the door.
What are the police doing here?
For Thomas, Harriet. For Thomas.
Following the 2 bobbies in to fill the doorway was a Rubenesque man. I'm feeling generous. With a thick chestnut moustache that hung over his top lip and thinning brown hair on his head. He wore a shabby suit and a long tweed overcoat.
Which one of you is pink?
That's me, Inspector.
And me. Was a woman on the phone?
You called the police? But surely they were already on their way. You called them, didn't you, Inspector?
Why would I call the police? I am the police, ma'am.
I am sorry, Inspector. I was talking to the other Inspector.
These 2 aren't inspectors. That's PC Dibble and that one's PC Grub. PC Cuthbert's just collecting something.
I was talking to him.
The Countess pointed at Rodney Chase, who was desperately trying to disappear inside the upholstery of his armchair. When he stopped scrabbling and stood to speak, his voice had utterly changed.
I say, I think there's been a bit of a mix-up here, old boy. When you say mix-up, what kind of mix-up? Allow me to introduce myself. Rodney Chase, actor, storyteller, raconteur, thespian, artiste. That's where I recognised you from. You were a spear carrier in Macbeth. A lead spear carrier, thank you. Anyway, I've been doing a bit of role play to prepare for a part, and I think my performance might have been a touch too convincing. This lot may think I'm a real police inspector. Is that so? Yeah. Not my fault, old bean. Too talented for my own good. But look, here's the nub of the thing. I actually managed to solve the whole shebang. I've got the murderer downstairs in the cellar. He also stole the Bruly Diamond, mind you. And I've also just uncovered a den of iniquity. This chap here in the red and the fellow in the cellar are in love, apparently. So there's another conviction for you. You're welcome. Thank you, sir. Most obliged. When you say you're Rodney Chase, actor,
That wouldn't be the same Rodney Chase, actor who drives a cream Jaguar Roadster with white wall tyres and red wheels, would it? Yes, that's my motor. And when you say your motor, I have it on good authority it was signed out for a test drive last week and is yet to be returned, sir. Ah, I can see what's happened there.
Rodders, that isn't your car?
It is. It's not. It bally well will be. If you say so, sir. Now, when you say the Bruly Diamond, do you mean this?
The inspector, the real one, reached a hand inside his long coat and pulled out a sparkling rock the size of a fist.
Well, yes, I suppose I do.
I felt I'd hidden my light under a bushel quite long enough. Did you find it where I said you would, Inspector?
Indeed I did, young lady. The glove compartment of the car this man claims to own, but does not.
Perry looked at me in astonishment.
Blimey, Penny, how did you know that?
At this point, another uniformed officer tapped the inspector on the shoulder and he stood aside to allow Thomas to enter the room. Mr. Webster embraced his son, who, to be fair, looked utterly baffled by what was happening. I gazed around the drawing room now filled with all the suspects, victims and witnesses, and explained exactly what had happened and how I'd solved the case of the crimes of the country garden. Harriet Longmeadow fell in love with a local star of the stage, Rodney Chase, but they could never be together.
Because of the outdated class system?
Perry helpfully added, beaming from ear to ear. They kept their love secret, but Lance Brown was obsessed with Lady Harriet and found out. He tried to blackmail the couple.
Harriet?
It's nonsense, Father. Nonsense. Where is the proof?
I gave the inspector the piece of evidence Perry had found for me in Harriet's room. Here is a letter addressed to the Earl from Lance Brown telling everything and providing some pretty compelling dates and times. I believe Rodney saw this letter when he met Lance on the day of his death. I told Inspector Chase that Lance was meeting someone, but he never followed up on it.
Right, I got a crack on. I'm in a bit of a hurry to meet someone, actually.
It was one of those things that made me question the inspector's credentials. Also, he arrived so quickly and without a car, almost as if he was already on the grounds, and he constantly refused to call for backup. Plus, he knew things about Longmeadow he couldn't possibly know, like the younger Webster being called Thomas, or the fact the Earl has a designated wine time. And he got some basic police language wrong. There aren't captains, and nobody incriminizes themselves. When I interrupted him inspecting Lance's body, he was looking for the bribe he'd paid him earlier for that letter. They'd exchanged letter for money, and Rodney had even thrown in a bottle of the Earl's best wine, stolen from the cellar by Lady Harriet, who had been siphoning off bottles to keep Lance quiet for weeks. It was poisoned, of course.
Incredible!
Isn't it? It's all very impressive. You'd be a credit to the force, young lady. What about this diamond, then?
Ah, that was easy. I saw Chase's reaction when he learned the diamond wasn't guarded. His eyes lit right up. Then he disappears for the morning.
I've been away checking something at the station.
At the same time it's stolen, I'll bet the plan was to come back here, cause a bit of a fuss, and then scarper in his fancy car with Lady Harriet to a new life with money from the diamond. He left on foot.
I saw him walking up the drive. Practically running, actually. Most undignified.
But returned with his car, which I heard arrive. There were no such cars for the day of Lance's murder, proving he was already here.
It's nonsense. All nonsense. It may well be, sir, but I think we'll just look into it down the station if it's all the same to you. You too, Lady Harriet, if you please.
Father, you're not going to allow this, are you?
I'm afraid I am. I've never been so disappointed.
Well, what about these two chaps, then? They're in love. They share a bed. They confessed. Arrest them.
Thomas hadn't been in the room for Charles's confession, so looked more than a bit shocked. His mother placed her hand gently on his and said,
I didn't hear any such thing, did you, love?
Not me. Your lordship. I'm sure I'd remember something like that.
And I certainly would have picked up on it long ago with my spirits. Christoph?
I heard nothing, but true love should be allowed to flourish wherever it chooses, no?
He gave his aunt a meaningful look, and Maisie took his hand.
Oh, indeed.
I never heard nothing neither. And that was just about that. Rodney Chase and Harriet Longmeadow were taken away, and the most remarkable thing happened next. The Countess and the Earl struck up a purely platonic companionship, based primarily around roses, aided by the rehired Mark Mims, and she moved into Longmeadow Hall, which is still served ably by Mr. and Mrs. Webster. I told Mrs. Webster she had nothing to worry about. Lance's flask was still on his desk, totally full of coffee. There is no way she could have poisoned him. Maisie went with Christophe to France, where, by all accounts, they live a simple life supported by a small stipend from the de Bruly estate. The biggest change came next door. With the Countess now living at Longmeadow Hall, de Bruly Court became an upmarket country retreat hotel presided over by Charles and Thomas. As for Perry and me, we returned back to working the same as we ever did. Well, almost the same.
Peeping Detective Agency. You need a detective. We'll put our best one on it. Penny, it's for you.
I'm on my way.
Well, there we go. The case is wrapped up and Penny and Perry are still working together.
But are they together?
Who knows?
Don't we know?
Do we?
I don't know.
See? Anyway. What do you think? Let us know. Ooh, audience engagement.
Oh, that'd be nice.
Yeah, we've absolutely loved creating this, and we've really enjoyed it, creating comedy, murder, mysteries and nonsense and sharing it with you all. And
We are hoping to produce another series soon too.
we are.
We're not sure if it'll see the return of Artridge or more Penny and Perry or a brand new detective yet.
That's because I haven't written it yet. And we don't actually know exactly when it will be out, again, because I haven't written it yet. But we do know it'll be filled with our love and it'll be fun and it'll quite probably be a return to daily episodes rather than weekly.
Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram so you don't miss an update.
Thanks for sticking with us this far, and there's still an option to support the company on our website by buying us a virtual coffee.
Yee-hee!
Lovely coffee. Anyway, see you soon.
Bye!
Crimes of a Country Garden is part of Comedy Whodunits for Your Ears, a New Old Friends production. Performed by Heather Westwell and Fergus Woods Dunlop, who also writes the show with music and sound from Fred Riding.